Get the recording started. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us this evening. I don't believe we're going to go for the full 90 minutes, but we'll certainly take the time that we need. If you could please, everyone, mute your phone. We certainly want your questions and input, but it helps on the background noise, and I heard some phones that were not muted before. You can use the mute function on your phone, or you can press *6 to mute your phone. So thank you. I hope everybody had a great summer. Such, we're looking forward to seeing many of you on Saturday for the area directors meeting, and the rest of you, I'm sure, at various competitions as we go through the rest of the season. Just wanted to take some time tonight, as we do at the beginning of each season, or prior to the beginning of each season, I guess, to go through some of the sports-related issues for the upcoming winter season, and we'll touch a little bit on spring as well. But here's our agenda. We'll go through the sports calendar, which hopefully everyone's familiar with, give you the status on the sports management teams and sports leads, talk a little bit about fall sports and bowling, then similarly the winter sports season with winter games, the winter games sports and basketball, some training and registration reminders related to coaching Special Olympics athletes and GMS, and then some updates on a couple things that are in the hopper. So let's see. So first, the sports calendar. Again, you should all be familiar with this, but it's been in the area memo that goes out pretty much every 2 weeks. We skipped a week there because Danielle was out of town. But so if it's hard to read on your screen, I apologize, but this is all the same information. We have scheduled a couple of the webinars coming up. We also now have the calendar scheduled through next year's Fall Sports Festival. The dates that are tentative on there, such as the kayaking and the Fall Sports and Golf Championships. The Golf Championships, we have 2 dates there we need to clarify with the USGA folks when they have their tournament. That there was a conflict this year, which is why we only had 2 USGA officials with us for the golf tournament this past weekend. So we want to get that clarified. But other than that, the rest of the dates are pretty firm. We just don't have the signed agreements in place yet. So we're continuing to try to keep those dates informed for you, close to, if not more than a year ahead for the calendar. So the next events that we have are the Fall Sports Festival on the 22nd of this month at Mount St. Mary's, the soccer tournament at Crown Sports Center in Fruitland on October 30th, and then our IUS Tennis Championship. And we'll talk a little bit about bowling in just a moment as well. Sports management teams, we've got several that are fully functioning. We've got a couple of the last 5 down there at the bottom. We've had a little issue with getting them launched, but expect to have them to be convening prior to before the end of the year, of this year, 2016. And then our sports leads. I should also say, when we send out the link to the recording, the slides will be with us as well. So if I'm going a little fast, it's because you'll get this. But if you have any question, please stop me. These are all pretty much the same. I don't think we made any changes. We will have the equestrian and the speed skating people identified. Those are the locally popular sports, but we're going through a couple things with those, but we'll have them identified before within the next few weeks. Then reminders on the fall sports registration. One thing to note there, we're giving an extension on any late or missing forms. We've done here at headquarters have not done an adequate job in getting the information out to you. That will be of anything that's missing. That will be out no later than tomorrow. Hopefully you know who is missing forms and such based on your own records, but we want to give you about a week at least to get anything in. Of course, nobody should be participating without an up-to-date medical, and nobody should be participating without an up-to-date volunteer application as well. So that doesn't vary with that. But in terms of anything we might be missing here at headquarters, we want to give you that time to get that into us. Then bowling registration, again, no changes there. I'm not sure that the bowling stuff went out, so we will also give you an extension on that one as well to the 12th. That if that has not gone out, I will be sure that it goes out to you tomorrow, based on the registration, the training registration that was due a week or so ago, or towards the end of or beginning of last week, rather. I apologize. Let's see, and then the pre-competition webinars. For fall sports, these have been all in the area memo. These are the registration links for those. If you can either forward the area memo to folks, or you can utilize this slide if you wish to pass it along to them. Note on bowling, and this is not a change, but from recent years, but I did want to point it out because it is a little bit different for folks who maybe have not been involved with bowling. First, that note in the upper right corner here in terms of this additional bowling note, just to clarify a conversation that occurred during the bowling preseason webinar several weeks ago. As many of you may know, Special Olympics is in every state, and there's a separate organization within every state that's all part of Special Olympics North America and Special Olympics Incorporated. We met with our colleagues in August, at the end of August, from the Mid-Atlantic region, which is from New York down to Virginia, the 8 states, 7 states plus D.C. In that area. And in the course of the conversation at the meeting there, it turned out, or we found, that Maryland was the only state that currently divisions its bowlers who use ramps among the bowlers who don't use ramps. In the rules, you have the option to do either one. Everyone else divisioned, every other state or organization in the Mid-Atlantic region at least, divisioned them separately, so had all their ramp bowlers bowling together in their own divisions. So during the preseason webinar, we asked for input as to whether this is something we should consider. It wasn't something we were necessarily advocating, but just to kind of get feedback. Since, not that we have to follow the pack of everybody else is doing, but if they're all doing it, maybe there's a reason, and it was worth asking coaches. The very strong response from the coaches during the webinar was, no, keep it the way we've been doing, and so we absolutely will be doing that. So it wasn't that we were making that change. We just wanted to get feedback on it, and so we definitely will continue to have the ramp bowlers divisioned separately, or within, rather, the divisions with everyone else, just as we've been doing for at least the last 3 or 4 years. Then for the state championships with bowling, again, as we've been doing for several years, we have our regional competitions, which there's 4 of them. They will be in the same locations as last year, which is the Glen Burnie, Ellicott City, Gaithersburg, and Frederick. Those will all be held on Sunday, November 13th. Following that competition, we will then look at how many gold medalists we have, and all gold medalists will be eligible to advance to the state competition, the state championships, which will be on Sunday, December 4th. Last year, there were, I think, 150 gold medalists who moved on or who were eligible to move on. We assume that will be the case, that there will be fewer than 200 to go on. We won't know until we have all the divisions done, of course. But once we have that information, if it turns out that there are more gold medalists than 200, then we'll do a random drawing of gold medalists, and that'll fill the spot. If not, if there are spaces left over after we consider the gold medalists, there will then be a random draw from amongst the silver medalists to fill any of the remaining spots. We will then send that information out to you no later than Wednesday evening. That Wednesday, November 16th, is the Wednesday following the regional bowling tournaments. I think for the last 2 years we actually got it out the next day, but it'll be no later than the 16th. That will include all of the bowlers who were selected to advance, as well as a waiting list. You then must get back to us by the following Monday as to which bowlers will use those slots. you must confirm if here it's not that silence, as in many cases, the assumption is if you don't say anything, then it's acceptable. In this case, you need to confirm that they are going. Otherwise, those slots will be taken away from your county, or those from those athletes, and they will be reallocated to other athletes who would use them. Because there's a limited number. There's only 200 that are available for the state championship. We want to be sure that every athlete, that every spot is going to be used. We certainly realize there'll be a handful of scratches the day of the tournament, the day of the championship, but we want to minimize that. So please be prepared. Have your coaches be prepared. I would even have your coaches asking ahead of time to confirm, can athletes go to the state tournament if they are selected from the gold medalists or the silver medalists. And then, again, we'll have that by the 21st, and then we'll get that list of the final selections back to folks a day or so later. But basically, if you've confirmed them, if they were the only people that wouldn't know that they would be advancing is anybody on the wait list. But what we've done, and we would continue to do, is contact you directly to tell you that, this athlete has moved up off the wait list. And we did go last year. I think we went actually as far as 20 people into the waiting list. So the waiting list is definitely a real thing. It's not just something there to as a pacifier or anything. It definitely is a useful tool, and it varies year to year how deep we go into it. So just want to be sure everybody understands that. It again is really no change at all from at least the last 2 years. The only thing that will vary again here is how many gold medalists we have. Okay. Then moving on for Winter Games, here are the registration dates. Again, those dates have all been out there as part of the sports calendar for several months. But here in this slide, if this is helpful for you to distribute to your coaches, again, the training registration deadline is January 12th, and then go from there. And then for basketball, similarly, these dates have been out in the sports calendar for a couple months at least, and the training registration deadline is January 26th. The winter sports preseason webinars are here. We have 2 of them definite. Our set for snowshoe is November 8th, and basketball is December 7th. We need to get one confirmation for one of the clinicians before we can make the Alpine one definite. You can feel free to distribute this to folks if you wish, but we will we'll update that in the next area memo, and we'll also send those dates and times and the links directly to the coaches who participated in those sports last year. So we pull the list of folks who did it last year and send that directly to them as well. We wouldn't have by those dates the coaches who are participating in 2017. So, of course, we couldn't send it to them. A couple notes on Winter Games. Excuse me. The coaches' dryland training will not be held as a separate session. It will be held as part of Coaches on Snow training on January 7th. There'll be a morning session on snow. During the lunch time, there will be the content that would be covered in the dryland. And dryland is maybe a misleading term here. It's more of a classroom session, going over rules, going over techniques, and so on down the line. And then they'll go back out onto the snow after that session, after the lunch break, which would be a couple hours. We'll, of course, work out so that we don't have to have people go through who are going to that session don't have to go through the lunch line for that. Then also, I don't know if anybody has been up near Whitetail or has been looking at their site. They've been doing a great deal of construction. Those of you familiar with the facility, they're basically building an entire, or almost done building an entire new building. If you know where the main property or the main building is, and where the Starbucks is on the first floor, it's sort of adjacent to there and goes back towards the parking lot. There's supposed to be, I think, a couple restaurants in there and such. We're going up next weekend, the 15th, to do a site visit. Steve's been up there, Steve Bennett, who I think everybody here knows or has heard his name at least, who's our Senior Director of Sports Competition and Coach Development, was up there a couple weeks ago. So the rest of the management team is going to go up to see how we can utilize that space, and we'll share whatever we can that's relevant in terms of for delegations and such following that, and may have some pictures and such. They should be almost complete with the construction at that point in time. In addition, remember last year we were considering moving from the hotel that we have been using for several years, primarily due to the deteriorating conditions of the hotel. Based on feedback, we stayed there one more year. It wasn't overwhelmingly stay there, but it was leaning towards that way. Quite honestly, the conditions continue to deteriorate and were even worse this past year. So we are we're very close to making that decision to make the move. The holdup is we need to find a backup plan for opening ceremonies if, due to the weather, we're unable to hold opening ceremonies at the hotel. At Whitetail, as we have for the last, or have at least planned to do for the last several years. We're expecting after the site visit we'll be able to make an assessment of the space. We'll also be visiting the new hotel property that is very eager to have us there. They're offering the same pricing. For the most part, it's a small difference between the main property and a couple very nearby hotels. It's the same property we were looking at potentially using when we broached this last year with folks. So after the site visit on the 15th, or shortly thereafter, we'll be able to make the final call on that. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to do it. I think everybody will like the new facility, but we have to have that backup plan since we needed to implement it 2 years ago, and don't want to be stuck without being able to do an opening ceremony. Okay. And again, as we're going through, anybody has any questions, please do just unmute your phone and jump in. I'm fine with going that route. This we've touched on several times, but just as a reminder, within GMS, please enter everybody, athletes, unified partners, everybody who's participating in your training program, even if they're not going on to state competition, or they don't join the program in time to go on to state competition. In other words, prior to the training registration deadline, even so much as if they only came once. It helps us in terms of keeping track of how many participated. It serves as a good record in case, God forbid, there's an incident or an accident and someone gets injured, to have that recorded and know that everybody who is participating is appropriate so, and we can also verify their medical and volunteer status as well.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
This is Ruth.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi. Can I backtrack to bowling, please?
Okay.
Okay, Unified. In the past, they've competed down in Gaithersburg.
It'll be at the same location. Yeah.
It'll still be at Gaithersburg?
Part of the reason is that the overwhelming majority of them. Now, let's put it this way: we'll look and see if there's a shift in that. But the overwhelming majority of the athletes who do Unified Bowling come from Charles County, and so looking to keep them at a facility that's in that proximity.
Okay, as long as I know where they're going. Last I heard, when I even talked to Nick, he said you all hadn't really decided.
Well,
I've got a ton of people that want to know where they're going to compete.
Right. As was gone over at the preseason webinar, I don't want to go too much into the details on it here. Mm-hmm. Our expectation is that where everybody went to last year is where they're going to go to this year in terms of for the regional. What may change it is based on how many people you've got participating. If there's a big swing, and like for example, I believe Baltimore County has started another training program for bowling this year, so may have an increase in their numbers. And if we need to shift folks around so that we can accommodate everybody, that would be the only change. The only reason that we would make that change. So it's okay. Not. I wouldn't say that it's an absolute 100% definite. It's probably in the 90% range. And okay. As soon as we we're able to figure all that out, which should be in the next week or two, we can get back to you and let you know for certain.
Okay, I'll just tell them it's looking towards Gaithersburg. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Then coaching Special Olympics athletes. I'm not going to repeat all of the coaching slides and the coaches training slides and so on down the line here that we've shared each time before. But I did want to touch on this. We are looking for areas to host both coaching Special Olympics athletes, which is the general coaching course that all coaches should at some point go through, and if they're a new coach, they need to go through. But also sports training sessions on specific sports. Obviously, the one that's coming up now would be basketball, and looking to do that. So if you are interested and you are available, we just need the physical space and want to be sure we have at least 5 to 7 folks, and you can arrange that through your regional sports director to do that. But on the bottom half of the slide, one of the things that we would like to do, we did this, I think, 2 years ago. Might have been 2 or 3 years ago. We're going to host another Train the Trainer session for coaching Special Olympics athletes. This is to take folks from the areas who are appropriate representative role models as coaches, since they would be presenting the course to other coaches in the future. We already have about 8 to 10 folks who have gone through this and are able to do it. We're not replacing them unless they no longer want to participate, so this is to supplement that number and that group. But we're looking to have about 6 reliable folks with coaching experience from the areas who may be interested and willing to do this. In addition, which is something we did not do the last time, is looking for 2 athlete leaders to also go through the course to be presenters for coaching Special Olympics athletes, along with mentors, a mentor for each of those athletes. If you could be thinking about anybody who in your area, we'd very much like to be sure we have a nice distribution of folks from around the state so that we can get as many or make it as easy as possible to host a course based on the needs that are out there. We would definitely be looking for at least one other person out in Western Maryland, one more. I think the only one who's out there, unless I'm forgetting someone, and I apologize if I am, John Follett in Washington County is the only person out west right now. We'll be looking for someone in Southern Maryland. I don't know that we have anybody. I think other than the furthest south is Ava Tucholsky in Anne Arundel. I could be wrong. I don't think we have anybody in Calvert, Charles, or St. Mary's. And then also somebody on the Eastern Shore. We have one person over there as well, and would like to supplement that. So if you'd be thinking about that, be thinking actually both, and I know Jason Schrimmel, who oversees our athlete leadership program, is looking for some athlete leaders, but if you have someone who you think, it should be athletes who have gone through the other athlete leadership training. But if you have anybody who you think would be interested and would be good at this, they need to be comfortable speaking in front of groups and presenting information, and these are longer sessions than just the typical presentations or speeches that athletes would give. These are the Coaching Special Olympics class or course takes about 3 hours or so, all told. And we certainly try to have it presented as in a team format as well. But we'd be looking for any of the participants, whether they're athletes or again, looking for the 6 former coaches or current coaches, would need to be nominated by the area director, and we'd review that just to be sure. Again, one of the things that we would be looking for is making sure that they're appropriate role models for excellent coaching and for representing the organization. They would also need to agree in advance to serve as a presenter multiple times a year. What multiple means, I can't tell you right now, but we want them to, let's say, at least 5 times, and not just in their area. They need to be able to travel, but we'd like to try to keep it within the particular region of the state that they would. So if they're in Western Maryland, we wouldn't be having them go to the Eastern Shore unless there was an emergency of some type, and they were willing to do so. But we would be expecting them to do several sessions each year, at least in their nearby territory, but including outside of their own area. And then there would also need to be some pre-work prior to the session to go through the online version of the course and review the materials so that we can do the actual training for the presenters or the trainers in one day. So if you have anybody who's interested, or you think anybody if you can think of anybody who might be wanting to do this, just keep them in mind. We'll have some more information in the area memo that'll go out for you on how to submit their names for this. It's a nice opportunity, particularly for somebody maybe who wants to step back a little bit from doing active coaching, and it's a fun course to present, particularly if you do it as a team. Okay. We've highlighted in the area memo a few times that finally there's new sports rules out. They come out every 2 years. They were for nearly all sports. I noticed when I was looking there that softball does not have new rules, and a couple other ones don't. And these are for the official, the international, if you will, official sports. So, for example, what is not included in there is flag football, which is a USA set of rules, and those weren't updated. And then also cheerleading, where at least currently it's not a recognized or an official sport by Special Olympics, and so Maryland has its own rules for that. But the rest are there. And finally, they now have changes, the summaries of the changes that are there. All of the rule changes and the summaries are located on the link that you see there, which is the resources page at SpecialOlympics.org, which is Special Olympics Inc.'s site. If you are looking there, it lists it has links to every one of the 2016 sports rules. It then has links to all the 2014 sports rules for anybody who's interested in that. And then down at the bottom, after both of those, are the links to the summaries of the changes that are there, so that you can get, rather than having to read, I don't know, for the track rules, it's something like 20 pages. It'll give you the 4 or 5 things that are actually changed, so that you can highlight that and not have to go in through and memorize the full set.
Mike?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, this is Dottie. My computer has Bowling State Championship. It's not going to the next page. Should it be?
It should be. There should be a slide that, and I hope everyone else sees it, that says new sports rules.
No, mine still says Bowling State Championship. It hasn't gone off of that since we started.
Could at least one other person confirm, are you seeing bowling or are you seeing new sports rules? So I can find out whether...
I see Bowling State Championship, Bowl America, Gaithersburg.
We've got new sport rules here.
Okay, so it sounds like, Dottie, it's maybe on your computer.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to figure out, if nobody's seeing it.
Yeah, I don't know why it hasn't left this page, so...
You may have lost your connection. Unfortunately, I can't, stop the webinar for that, but you'll get the slides.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, you'll
I'll
get the
get
slides.
Updates, yeah, when you send them out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for telling us, though. It's good.
Right,
it was good to check that. So, as was noted in the individual sports preseason webinars, we're sticking with the 2014 sports rules for all of the sports through soccer. There were no, we did check to see if there were any health and safety rules changes, which we would have implemented immediately if there were, but there weren't any. So since they came out after programs started doing their training for those sports, we're sticking with the 2014 through soccer. We will be using the 2016 sports through sports rules, the new ones through starting with bowling in of this year. I don't remember there being very many, if any. I think there was some clarification on uniforms was the big change that's there, and it's nothing major. It's just I think it actually loosens it up a little bit, quite frankly, from what was previously in the rules. And then also just to reassure folks, there are several rules or adaptations that Maryland uses. We go over those in each year in the preseason sessions for those specific coaches. There's a few of them listed there, such as the 3v3, where we now have our the 3v3 games play the full 20 minutes as opposed to stopping at 20 points. a lighter weight bar for powerlifting that's even lighter than what they did make the rule change for to use a somewhat lighter bar, but it's not as light as the athletes who need it or we felt need it. With that, we'll continue to do that. The option of using a throw-in or a kick-in for 7v7, and then we also will continue to offer the 1 kilometer race in kayaking. Now, note with that, if any of these affect such as example the lighter weight bar, that may make that individual ineligible to go to higher level competition because the rule would not be there, which is something we ran into in New Jersey, which kind of prompted us submitting that rule change. But anyhow, all of those rule changes, the adaptations that we've been holding and been implementing in Maryland will continue to be implemented, and they'll be reviewed again in each of the preseason webinars. But be sure that your coaches know this. We have the webinars and we go over this, and we'll certainly remind folks of the new sports rules with each of the upcoming ones. But in case people don't go there, they really need to be aware of that, and it will be no excuse at all for them to come to an event and not know that there's new rules or any of the rule changes that are there. So speaking of advancement, I wish I had more information, but I can give you the summary of what we know at this point for USA Games in 2018. They will be July 1st through 6th in 2018. The sports that are being offered you see there, we found out 5 hours ago that baseball, kayaking, unfortunately, and triathlon. Kayaking is the only one that really affects Maryland that we have anybody doing. Unfortunately, will not be offered now. They had been listed. In fact, actually, they were on the piece that we included in the most recent area memo still had those listed. We literally found out 5 hours ago that they are not being offered. They're also checking on soccer, and it may be that and I'm not sure why they made the decision this way. I can guess, but it may be that 5v5 traditional teams. The traditional teams will play 5v5 if we don't know what our slots are. We don't know what our allotments are, so we may not even get a soccer team to go. But it may be that traditional teams will do 5v5 and unified would be 7v7. They've asked feedback from the states by Friday, and we've given the feedback I provided to them was that we definitely would prefer 7v7, but we could live with 5v5. For those of you who went to New Jersey in 2014, they offered 5v5 there. That would not make, if they go with 5v5, it would not make, and we get a slot, it would not make us ineligible to use that slot. We would just need to look at the team and the roster size, and they'd be playing a 5v5 game if they make that decision. We're still hoping to have our final allotment in the next several weeks. The earliest it would be, I would imagine, would be the end of next week, but I wouldn't hold my breath for that. And then once we find out what we've gotten, then we can start looking at the next steps and such. As a repeat there, we haven't received that, the allotment. We will be making the decision, though, or the selections for whatever allotments we get based on the competitions or the state championships held between July 2016 and June 2017. We will also be creating a management team, much as we did for in going to the New Jersey Games or the USA Games in New Jersey in 2014. But we want to wait and see what we have in terms of our allocation before we go down that road. Because also the number of athletes or spots that we get will determine the number of coaches and additional personnel that we can take and house with the delegation. Then the other big change, and this is coming from Special Olympics North America, and from a sports perspective, it makes total sense. And from a management of their delegation, it makes sense. But basically, for any sport that is being offered at the 2018 USA Games, the athletes who would be part of the USA team to go to the 2019 World Games. We don't know where that is yet, so don't even ask. But basically, they'll select the Team USA members from the athletes who attend the 2018 USA Games. For those for those sports that aren't offered at the 2018 USA Games, so for example, cycling. Shockingly, cycling is not being offered at the 2018 USA Games. I don't know why. Don't ask. I don't know why. But cycling would use the traditional selection method. Part of the reason, in addition to it being a sports, a more traditional sports approach of you advance to the next level based on your performance at the previous level of competition. So, you go from, just as the athletes that go on to the USA Games from Maryland are going to be, would be gold medalists who go on, or selected from gold medalists. It's the same thing here. The other part of it, too, quite frankly, is that the delegations that have gone to the World Games from the USA, they've had some problems with with some of the athletes. None from Maryland, luckily, but who were not appropriate for a trip of that duration. It's basically more than 2 weeks between the getting out there, and they usually do a little pre-event nearby to where the games are being held before they go on campus, and so on. So it's basically away for 2 weeks with people who they don't really know because the coaches are coming from all over the country and such. And so they've run into some issues where athletes who have gone just turned out to not be able to handle that kind of a trip, quite frankly. So that's one of the reasons they're implementing that. So I just want to be upfront and let everybody know that when it comes time for the 2019 World Games, World Summer Games, this is the process that we'll go through. Before anybody asks as well, for the 2021 World Winter Games, I'm not sure what they're going to be doing, mainly because there is no USA Winter Games at this point in time. Perhaps they'll create one before then, or they'll find some other system. As it is right now, for example, for the group that went to LA in 2015 and the 3 athletes from Maryland, but for the whole group that's going to Austria in this next, I guess, in March of 2017, they're not official members of the delegation or considered official members of the delegation until after the training camp that they're hosting, the Special Olympics, or that the Team USA is hosting for the Winter Games. It'll be, I believe, in December. Anyway, just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. I can understand some folks may not agree with that in terms of, because it does reduce the number of athletes who get this level of experience. But there are certainly reasons why, and it's a decision that the organization is going forward with. And then just a couple additional items to highlight. We had mentioned at the last session or the last webinar like this that we would have a process for posting events. We've been able to do that informally, but we'll have a formal process that we'll share in the next couple days. My expectation is to be able to go over that very briefly at the area directors meeting on Saturday with folks, and that's not on MySOMD, that's the public site. For example, the Montgomery County, this isn't a sports event, but the Montgomery County Inspiration Walk, which was this past weekend, was listed there and such. So I just want to, and that was one of the ones that we were able to do sort of on an ad hoc basis, but we want to make it more formal and make it more available and easier to use for folks. So we're pleased to do that. I did mention about the 2017 World Winter Games. The games themselves, as you see there, are 11 days. The Team USA will be going out a few days ahead of time, and will likely be departing a day or so later. In Austria, we do have 3 athletes. We still need to list them as nominated to be on Team USA. until they get through training camp. I don't expect, knowing all three of these athletes personally, I don't think there's going to be any kind of an issue for that. But again, until they go through that process, they're not officially members of the delegation. But we have Patrick Speaker from Washington County doing snowshoe, Brian Berry from Anne Arundel County doing alpine skiing, and Megan Cooper from Montgomery County doing cross-country skiing. We also are really pleased that we got two coaches from Maryland, two alpine coaches, longtime folks with the program who are going as well. They are official members of the delegation. That is Diane Michaelis from Howard County, and then Dan Cowdery, who's not really with the county. Dan's on our sports or our management team for alpine skiing and has worked very closely with coaches on athlete training and such. He's also gone, I think it was like 15 years ago or so, to a World Winter Games in a similar capacity. So we're very excited that those folks will be there. And then I think this is actually the last item before we go on, before you can wrap. But we're very pleased that Ron Freeman, who many of you know, has joined us as the Baltimore Region Director effective this past Saturday. Ron is a very familiar face. He's been a member of the athletics management team for 10, 12 years. Back when I was the athletics director, before I came on staff, he was in essence my right hand there, or my right arm, and he's led the team to even greater heights after he assumed the leadership of that. He also has been the lead for snowshoe for similarly for several years, and then took over the mantle after I moved to my new capacity here at headquarters. So we're very thrilled. Before anybody gets all panicky and such, one of the things that we did have as part of in terms of what happens to snowshoe and what happens to track, we are looking for new folks to handle or to take on the leadership either within the teams that are managing those sports or from outside of the teams. Ron will, as we made this as part of his hiring agreement, and he was very happy to do this, he will be serving in a transitional role for both of those sports for the upcoming Winter Games and the upcoming Summer Games to either lead the sport if we don't have someone identified in time, or to help which may be the case for snowshoe, or work side by side with them to transition the responsibilities and make sure that we have as smooth a transition for those two sports, which from all reports run very well, and it was one of our big concerns with bringing him on to take over some of the to work closely with the Baltimore City and Baltimore County, which I'm sure he will do an exceptional job in that capacity. So we're thrilled to have him in that new role. And then that's it. Just a reminder of your contacts and such. Ron now is he's not the interim contact. I'm sorry, that I have to take that out. Ron is the official, the last item there, the Baltimore Region Director. So that said, and it's actually only 45 minutes instead of 90. Did anybody have any other questions that we haven't touched on that are sports related? Remember to unmute your phone if you do. No? Okay. Then thank you again for joining us tonight. I hope this was helpful. If not a lot of new information, at least some helpful reminders. We'll send the link to the recording out tomorrow along with the slides. That'll also be posted on MySOMD on the both the coaches section as well as the field services section, and that's available for you to share with whomever you think would find appropriate. And again, we're looking forward to seeing many of you on Saturday for the area directors meeting, where we'll be talking about some key issues related to plans for the next year and a half to 3 years, and some federal government changes that are going to impact how we do some operations. So I'm not going to go into that now. We'll review that when we see everybody on Saturday. So thanks again. Have a great evening, and we'll see you all soon. Good night.
Good night.